Okay, let's unpack this. Today we're embarking on a deep dive into the formative years and the astonishing, chilling rise of one of the 20th century's most impactful figures. We're going to peel back the layers and try to really understand the surprising, often contradictory journey that propelled him from, well, utter obscurity to absolute catastrophic power.
What's truly compelling here, I think, is how your sources, and they range from detailed biographies, historical analyses like The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, even his own controversial work, Mein Kampf, and entries from Encyclopedia Britannica, how they allow us to piece together this mosaic of formative experiences and, pivotal decisions. It's really a story of how personal frustrations and broader societal conditions didn't just converge, but sort of catastrophically amplified each other.
Right. And our mission today is to extract those potent nuggets of knowledge, those aha moments that reveal the underlying currents of history. We want to offer you a clear, concise understanding of how this individual came to be. It's about more than just dates and names. It's understanding the psychological and historical forces at play. So let's start right at the very beginning. What do our sources tell us about his early childhood, the environment he grew up in?
Well, the sources consistently point to his birth on April 20th, 1889 in Braunau Inn, a small Austrian town. They note his roots in a rather stern, middle-class family. His father, Adolf Hitler, was a strict civil servant, a customs officer. His rigid demeanor often clashed with his son.
Okay.
But in contrast, his mother, Clara Hitler, is described as this loving and compassionate presence, someone he apparently deeply adored.
And how did these distinct early relationships, especially with his father, seem to shape his developing personality?
It seems pretty clear from the sources that the relationship with his father was fraught, lots of tension, even fear. He developed a stubborn, intensely self-willed, and quite sensitive nature from a young age. And academically, he struggled. He disliked strict discipline, frequently quarreled over school rules. His results were consistently poor. So this early resistance to authority, combined with that deep bond to his mother and the conflict with his father, it offers us some initial clues maybe into the complex individual he'd become.
That difficult beginning certainly sets a stage. But it's when we look at his aspirations, beyond that conventional path, that things really start to get interesting. He had artistic dreams, didn't he?
Absolutely. The sources really highlight this childhood passion for art drawing, painting buildings, landscapes, and this burning ambition to become a famous artist. This led him, at a young age, to Vienna. The goal was specific: enroll in the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts.
But that didn't work out.
No. His applications were rejected, not just once, but twice. And this was, by all accounts, a profound blow to his aspirations.
So this double rejection, and then his subsequent time struggling in Vienna, that must have been incredibly formative. What do the sources suggest about the impact of that period?
Well, what's striking here, what the sources consistently point to, is how these personal failures, the rejections, the poverty that followed, the isolation, living in cramped rooms, eating cheap food, selling small pictures on the street, it didn't break him exactly, but it seemed to radicalize him.
How so?
It's almost as if the humiliation he felt personally got externalized, projected onto society. He started seeking scapegoats, extremist ideologies as a sort of perverse way to explain his own suffering, maybe even validate himself. It was during these years, the Vienna years, that his inclinations towards politics, virulent racism, and ideological extremism really took firm root.
Vienna itself, as a city, played a crucial role, almost like a catalyst, in shaping these extreme views, didn't it?
It certainly did. The sources paint Vienna as this melting pot of shifting political currents, virulent nationalism, particularly anti-Semitism. These weren't just whispered theories. They were openly championed by certain political factions in parts of the media.
It was very public.
Yes. It wasn't abstract. It was in the popular press, in political speeches, deeply ingrained in some segments of society. And this provided fertile ground for someone like him to latch onto these ideas, embracing them wholeheartedly, focusing his, nascent hatred on Jews, socialists, communists.
Moving on to the world stage then. How did an Austrian citizen, seemingly isolated in Vienna, get so deeply involved in World War I?
Well, when World War I erupted in 1914, despite his Austrian citizenship, he immediately volunteered for the German army. He fully embraced German nationalism. It's a testament, really, to his burgeoning ideological convictions. He fought on the front lines as an ordinary soldier throughout the war and was actually awarded medals for bravery several times.
And it's fascinating, isn't it, how for him, the experience of war wasn't disillusioning like it was for so many others. What was his perspective?
The sources reveal this chilling fascination with war on his part, almost a romanticization of the conflict. Instead of being broken by the brutality, he seemed to find this perverse sense of belonging, of purpose in the chaos. He viewed it as the ultimate crucible for nationalism, sacrifice, a distorted kind of heroism, and that's a narrative he'd later exploit hugely for political gain.
Then the war ended. Germany's defeat in 1918. How did he react to that outcome? And what was the wider situation in Germany at that really pivotal moment?
Well, Germany's defeat was a profound personal tragedy for him. It deeply wounded his sense of nationalistic pride. He immediately redirected his own immense disappointment into this virulent blame game, targeting Jews, socialists, politicians, labeling them publicly as traitors to the nation.
And the country itself.
Germany was reeling. The Treaty of Versailles imposed these crippling reparations, drastically limited the army, stripped away significant territories. These weren't just clauses on paper. They were tangible symbols of national shame that resonated deeply with the public's wounded pride and sense of injustice.
A fertile ground for resentment.
Absolutely. Add to that widespread hyperinflation, rampant unemployment, famine. You have a society gripped by desperation. And for figures like him, this chaotic environment presented an almost golden opportunity to convert that public anger and despair into political power.
Which leads us directly to his formal entry into politics. What was his first step into that arena, according to the sources?
In 1919, he joined this small, relatively obscure group called the German Workers' Party. What quickly became apparent, though, were his impressive, powerful oratory skills. He had this uncanny ability to captivate and sway audiences, and he rapidly rose to become the party's most prominent leader.
And he didn't waste time rebranding that party, did he?
No, not at all. By 1920, he decisively changed the name to the National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazi Party as we know it. He effectively offered the German people this compelling, although deeply dangerous dream, restoring their nation to global power. The superiority of the Aryan race, fervent opposition to Jews, creating a powerful German state. These became the core tenets of his new radical manifesto.
His early political efforts weren't exactly a smooth climb, though. As we move into the tumultuous 1920s, it's easy to forget his path wasn't just straight up. There were significant setbacks. Perhaps none more dramatic or pivotal than the infamous Beer Hall Putsch of 1923. What exactly happened there?
Right. In 1923, he and his fledgling party attempted this coup in Munich, the Beer Hall Putsch. Their audacious goal was to seize the local government, ignite a nationwide revolution, and basically overthrow the Weimar Republic. However, the attempt was spectacularly mismanaged. It failed miserably. He was arrested, along with other leaders, and the party was temporarily banned.
A huge failure, you'd think? But it had this unexpected and arguably transformative consequence for his strategy, didn't it?
It really did. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, though he only ended up serving about 9 months. Crucially, it was during this time in prison that he wrote his seminal and incredibly controversial book, Mein Kampf, My Struggle. This book became this direct window into his mind, articulating all his thoughts, his ideas, ambition.
A blueprint, almost.
Exactly. Detailing how Germany could be made great, why Jews had to be expelled, his vision of an Aryan-ruled world. It wasn't just a memoir, it effectively became the foundational text, the main source of Nazi ideology. A chilling blueprint for what was to come.
So what did that whole experience, the failed putsch, the prison time, solidifying his ideology, what did it teach him about actually seizing power?
His time in prison seems to have been a real crucible. He came out with a stark realization that overt force, like the putsch, while maybe appealing on some level, wasn't the most effective path. Instead, he pivoted. He understood that the existing democratic system, with its elections, its public platforms, could actually be a far more potent weapon.
Using democracy to destroy democracy.
Precisely. He meticulously reorganized the Nazi Party, developed this sophisticated and powerful propaganda machine, actively recruited young people, and strategically channeled all that deep-seated anger, resentment, and frustration of the German people into a potent political force.
And what societal factors were playing into that? What helped the Nazi Party gain popularity during this strategic shift?
The timing was absolutely critical. The devastating economic crisis, particularly the Great Depression after 1929, plunged Germany into even deeper despair. Widespread unemployment, social unrest, a general sense of hopelessness. It created this fertile breeding ground for radical solutions. The existing political parties just seemed incapable of solving the nation's profound problems, which made the Nazi party's clear, albeit extremist, answers increasingly attractive to a desperate population.
And that strategy, combined with the societal turmoil, brings us to that key date, January 30th, 1933. What was the pivotal event?
On January 30th, 1933, the German president Paul von Hindenburg appointed Adolf Hitler as Chancellor of Germany. This was the truly pivotal moment, the point at which he legally, through democratic means, came to power. It ushered in a new and frankly terrifying era.
But this democratic path, as history chillingly shows us, very quickly led somewhere else entirely, didn't it?
It did, almost immediately. Once he had that power, he swiftly began dismantling the very democracy that had brought him there. He abolished opposing political parties, suppressed the media, silenced independent voices, systematically established himself as an absolute dictator. This new Nazi government then embarked on the path that would ultimately lead the world into the devastation of World War II.
Now, our sources also offer a glimpse, albeit a limited one, into his highly secretive personal life. Specifically, his relationship with Eva Braun. Who was she? How did that relationship unfold?
Eva Braun is described in the sources as, well, a relatively unassuming young woman. She worked at a photographer's studio he frequented. Their relationship seems to have begun sometime after 1930. She was apparently deeply devoted to him, often having to contend with his overwhelming political preoccupations, his notorious inattention to personal matters.
And this relationship was kept incredibly secret for nearly 14 years. Why? Why was that secrecy so important to him?
The sources explain it was a deliberate strategy. He cultivated this image of being solely dedicated to the German nation, sort of an ascetic, almost superhuman leader, unburdened by personal attachments. Being seen as a woman's husband would, in his view, detract from that manufactured persona.
A stark illustration of his public manipulation.
Absolutely. And the sources even chillingly note Eva's repeated attempts at suicide, apparently driven by this desperate need for his attention, for recognition within this intensely private and unequal relationship.
It's a truly unsettling personal story within this much larger, horrific one. How did their relationship finally end amidst the collapse of his regime?
The sources describe those final, desperate moments. April 30th, 1945. Berlin is under siege by the Russian army. Germany's defeat is undeniably certain. And then he married Eva Braun in his underground bunker. A bizarre, macabre ceremony.
And that marriage, as we know, was remarkably short-lived.
Tragically so. Just a few hours. That very same day, with his world crumbling around him, they both committed suicide. He shot himself, and Eva ingested cyanide. It was a dark, definitive end, both to their personal story and the horrific chapter he had forced upon the world.
So where does this leave us? What does it all mean? The story of Adolf Hitler, as we've explored it today through your sources. It's not just history, is it? It's this chilling narrative of how one individual, through this strange mix of early personal despair, intensely cultivated hatred, a cynical pursuit of power, and even this hidden obsessive personal relationship, plunged the world into unimaginable war, genocide, and destruction.
Yes, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really underscores how deeply interconnected personal psychology, societal grievances, and historical context can be. His journey wasn't inevitable. It was this terrifying confluence of specific choices and external factors that he masterfully and horrifically exploited. His final desperate act with Eva Braun, while a personal tragedy, became this indelible symbol of the global catastrophe he unleashed.
So for you, the listener, what stands out most from this deep dive into his early life and rise? What aspect of this man's journey? His artistic rejections, the radicalizing crucible of Vienna, his strategic pivot after prison, maybe the dark paradox of his hidden personal life. What will you continue to mull over? Perhaps explore further as you consider the fragility of democratic systems and, well, the dangerous allure of absolute power.
Did you like this video? Thank you for watching War History. Please like, channel, subscribe, and share this video.